So I've got a Line 6 Helix right here, and I've got a Kemper Stage right here. And since it's been a little over 3 years since the Kemper Stage was released, and since both of these units have come a really long way in terms of their firmware updates, I thought it'd be great to take another look at these units side by side. And in this video, the main question is which unit is right for you. In this case, I think both units are fantastic and both are going to be really enjoyable to play. However, I think both units are going to appeal to different types of guitar players. Most of my experience has been with the Kemper head unit, where I've owned that for over 4 years, and a few months back I actually sold it to purchase the Kemper Stage. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And about 8 months ago, I also found a steal of a deal on the Line 6 Helix LT, where I have used this a lot for my own personal playing, for Sunday morning worship, and for content on this channel. And for anybody wondering, or before I get any comments down in the section below, the flagship Helix and the LT are virtually the exact same in terms of the actual software. The big difference is going to be some of the hardware, where the flagship Helix is going to have scribble strips. It's going to have a better volume and expression pedal as well. Now, let's get back to that original question. Which of these units is right for you? Now, if you are new to researching these two modelers, you will quickly find out that the Kemper isn't actually a modeler. The Helix, however, is. And in this case, the Helix is going to have a processor that is going to emulate the way that it thinks an amp will sound and respond given different microphones and different microphone placements. The Kemper, however, is going to have a sonic profile, and it's going to save the way that an amp sounds and responds based off of different frequencies, and it saves it inside of the Kemper unit. Now, as Rhett Scholl pointed out in his video, for the longest time, this is what kind of separated the two units from being really head-to-head competitors. However, over the last few years, Line 6 has been really aggressively updating their firmware, and with the most recent firmware update, the Helix has never sounded better. Now, with more amps, with more effects, and with better cab response and feel, the Helix has come a really long way. Now, what I think that means for you watching this video is both of these units are going to sound amazing. Now, this video will not be a direct A-B comparison because I think both units sound fantastic. However, the way you achieve those great tones is going to be different depending on the unit you purchase. In my opinion, I think the Kemper has better feel and response than the Helix. Because the Kemper is using a real recording or a sonic profile of an amp, I feel like it sounds more like I'm playing something that is mic'd up in another room in terms of feel and response than the Helix is able to deliver. However, that comes with a caveat. First of all, I think to get really great sounds out of your Kemper, you need really great profiles. And in this case, you're kind of limited to the profile someone else has created. Profiling an amp is not as easy as just slapping a mic in front of your AC30. However, there are a lot of really fantastic companies that do offer free profiles, such as Tone Junkie, Michael Britt, Selah Sounds, and more. Second, this means you're also a little more limited as to how much you can tweak an individual profile with the Kemper. In this case, if you want to go in and make massive adjustments to the EQ or individual parameters inside of the profile can fall apart pretty quickly. This is where I think the Helix can really shine. With the recent firmware updates, I really think the Helix offers some fantastic amp sounds and really thrives when it comes to effects. I'll talk more about that later. But the Helix is also going to allow for a lot more individual customization and is really user-friendly. If you want to be able to go in and control all aspects of your tone, including the microphone, the placement of that microphone, the cabinet that microphone is being placed on, the Helix is going to give you a lot of options. And truth be told, when I'm playing in a live mix, I honestly can't tell a difference between the Kemper and the Helix. Now, when I'm playing by myself, I can absolutely tell a difference because the feel, the response is definitely different between the units, and I think both of them have their own unique sonic characteristics. For instance, the Kemper kind of has a mid-range growl and compression that happens when profiling an amp, and the Helix is going to have this high-end fidelity that I can't quite put my finger on. But again, when I'm playing live with in-ear monitors, I can't really tell a big difference. One final point here is I do feel like the Helix also responds better if you're using it as a pedal platform. Now with that said, I haven't had the opportunity to take pedals into the HX Stomp, which I know a lot of people use the HX Stomp as a amp and IR platform with their pedal board. So take that with a grain of salt. All in all, I think if you want a more true to amp feel and experience, go with the Kemper. If you want something that's a little bit more dynamic, intuitive, and fun and interactive to use, I think you should go with the Helix. It's safe to say over the last 10, 15, 20 years, a lot more musicians are switching to digital modelers and profilers than they ever have. In this case, I think it's partially because the availability of those units is becoming a lot more cost effective for the average musician. For instance, Line 6 is going in and they're creating a lot of different options for different price ranges for different types of players. And in my opinion, it has never been a better time to get into digital modeling than it is today. I think that paired with the insane weight of a guitar, a cabinet, a pedal board, and lugging that gear around constantly to and from gigs or between recording sessions makes a digital unit a lot more appealing. Now, you may be thinking, what does that have to do between these two units? And it's honestly everything. And I think both of these units are attempting to answer that question. How can they offer fantastic tones to musicians without the extra bulk and weight of added gear? Now, I think both of these units do that, but once again, they do it in a different way that appeals to different types of players. I think the Helix takes on a really intuitive and engaging interface that I think has led to a lot of this success of the unit. I really enjoy the built-in expression. I think the backpack with the Helix is fantastic, and Helix has also gone out of their way to introduce options like the Stomp or the Pod Go to make it more appealing to a wider variety of players. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I owned the Kemper Head for over 4 years and recently switched to the Stage. And the main reason I wanted to do that was largely just to have something that was more portable than the Head. And I think compared to the Helix, the Kemper Stage is a smaller unit, it's lighter, it's easier to fit on a pedal board. However, I feel like the Kemper Stage bag is a lot flimsier, doesn't hold up or look really nearly as cool as the Line 6 backpack does. And I'm also a little frustrated that Kemper decided to move away from a built-in expression pedal. I understand why they did it, but it's one more thing that you could forget when you're taking to a gig. Now, with all that said, I think I like the way the Kemper Stage looks better. However, I do love the really big dynamic display on the Helix. Living in the 21st century, we're honestly really spoiled. If we go back to the 90s and 2000s and look at some of the effects units back then versus what we have now, we have come a really long way. Honestly, guys, I remember owning a Digitech RP2000 back in my early church days. Now, this next section is going to assume that if you're buying one of these units, you are also planning to use the amp modeling as well as the profiling with the effects on board. Now, the Kemper has come a really long way in terms of its effects. As somebody that has only used the Kemper effects for over 4 years, I've been really pleased with them, and especially with their reverbs and delays, I think they're fantastic. However, when I purchased the Helix, I did not realize how fantastic Line 6's effects were, how deep, luscious, and vibrant their tremolos and reverbs and delays are as compared to the Kemper. Kemper's is not bad, they're still fantastic, but I feel like the Line 6 effects, specifically wet effects, are that next step above the Kemper at this point in time. Now, with that said, I do feel like the Kemper overdrives, distortions, and fuzz respond better to the profile, and because of that, feel better and sound better to my ears. Now, if you're not somebody that plays with a ton of effects, I think both of these units are still fantastic for you, but I think the Kemper still has an edge in terms of the amp sound compared to the Helix. If you're a studio musician or somebody who gigs regularly, it is super nice to have a desktop editor available. You can easily go in and make sweeping adjustments on the fly without having to dive into a tiny screen while in a gig. Now, Kemper released their desktop editor back in 2019, and honestly, it's okay. I have a lot of issues with it. A lot of the times the application will freeze and I'll have to reload it only for it not to work again. However, from what I've been told, that is just my personal experience and others have great experiences with it. I do like the ability to go in and adjust the parameters and tweak profiles within the desktop editor. I like the separation of profiles and performances. At least compared to the HX Edit app, I am in love with Line 6's HX desktop editor. In this case, it is nothing fancy, it is very straightforward, but it just works. If you do happen to use IRs with the Helix, it will go in and automatically match that to the patch you are also using. It's super easy to make adjustments to an individual parameter of the amp, and it is just a really dynamic experience that looks very similar to how you would edit on the platform like the Helix itself. All in all though, both units do have a desktop editor, and the Kemper Stage actually does have an iOS app that you can use your iPhone or your iPad on to be able to make adjustments on the fly. I've used it and I actually think it's pretty slick to be able to make adjustments quickly while you're in a live game. Now, in terms of which is easiest to use, honestly, that's a super subjective question, and whatever is easiest for me may not necessarily be easiest for you. However, in my experience and the experience I've heard from others is the Helix has a smaller learning curve and is more intuitive and easy to use. The signal chain is very clearly laid out on the Helix, and it's super easy to go in and make adjustments with the big colorful display. However, with that said, I think the Kemper has a pretty intuitive interface as well. It just takes some time to get used to. I remember when I bought the unit, I watched probably every video on YouTube at the time to try and take it all in. And because of that, it may not have felt like as steep of a learning curve to me, but may feel steep for somebody else. Honestly, I don't know if I can tell you which unit to buy. What I can tell you, however, is in my experience, the Kemper is a really fantastic unit that's fun to play, sounds fantastic, and feels a lot like a real amp. Besides some of the latency issues and the quirks surrounding the hardware, it's a really fantastic system. Now, with that said, I think the Helix still sounds fantastic and has a really immersive interface that is just fun and enjoyable to play. Also, from a technical standpoint, I really feel like the Kemper and the Helix can do anything I'd ever want it to do. Now, if you're still on the edge, I've got 2 more videos where you can dive into the Kemper or the Helix. See you later.